Hi Tina, hi Charles, Ali here. So just wanted to chat through ideas for your front garden project here, and I find it the sort of best way to kind of show you the ideas and what I was thinking. So thank you for such a comprehensive brief. That's absolutely fantastic. And as we sort of talked about, the main difficulty with your garden really is sort of working with these curves that we've got. So obviously the driveway has already been built and is in place, this existing sort of curvy, wavy lines. And then we've got a very kind of angular plot with all these different angles. It's not square, it's, we've got sort of funny angles going off. And also you really quite like the sort of modern clean lines and contemporary look. So the whole thing for me was quite an interesting puzzle to solve, of how to kind of combine the straight lines with the curves. So going through all of your images here, and everything that you sent me, and then I'll talk you through what I've done for you. Something that I want to just quickly mention is what really struck me, what I hadn't kind of really appreciated until I saw this photo, was this lovely view to the open countryside that you've got, especially from a sort of elevated position. I presume this is from upstairs window, but presumably even from your front steps, sort of kind of porch area, you've still got this lovely open view. Obviously the site's been kind of cleared, presumably for build and everything, and you've put up these kind of temporary screens which kind of do the job and disappear into the background. But that really sort of kind of surprised me in a pleasant way. And these, obviously we've got the sort of borrowed view of your neighbours' trees which frame the plot beautifully. But I was really intrigued by this, and I want to kind of ground your garden in a way so it doesn't look like it's kind of been designed out in the ether and kind of landed from Mars, so to speak. I always like to kind of ground it to the surroundings and sort of pick up on the open countryside around it. And what that really means, it sounds like a very arty way of saying that really I want to include some more trees into this space, and I want to just make it link more with this countryside and sort of perhaps frame some of this as well so that it all feels like it belongs and it's kind of well grounded into the space, if that makes sense. So you'll see where I've suggested some trees. These are really quite important, and the sort of mention of trees kind of terrifies some. You think, oh, and the roots, and is it going to upset the build and things? But we'll keep them small. But I just want to show you how it can transform this space. So that's one thing to mention from there. And without further ado, let's have a look at this design. This is my first concept it wasn't my first concept at all, it was one of about 10, 10 of which I was unhappy with. And this one I tinkered with and tinkered with, and I've actually worked this into a 3D model for you because I'm so pleased with how it's come together, and I hope you will be too. And I just think it really works for the space. And then once I'd got this one to work, I sort of struggled to see how any of the others that I'd sort of played with would at all. So this is what I'm going to present to you. I sort of feel quite strongly that this is kind of workable solution that we could sort of maybe go forward with. So what have I done? The whole concept really is I want to incorporate some of those modern straight lines, raised planter beds and the water feature, and also the idea that you had from this photo of something that you liked, and I like this very much. These strips of material, a kind of slate, a darker grey, and perhaps some kind of strips and uprights, but particularly this that you've marked here, and you'd marked the topiary balls. So it's how to go from that very linear look, from what you have as these sweeping curves. And the way that I think we can do that is to be a bit clever with geometry. So what I've done is created some circles, some perfect circles using the centre point of a circle on the edge of this drive, and it's almost like if you imagine taking a compass point round there, it's not just a wavy line, it's a perfect or part of a perfect circle here for extra parking, a compacted sort of gravel area for additional cars, but it would be a soft landscaped area, so it's not as hard as this driveway material. You could even plant into it as well, so that's a nice big open space there, but it's the geometry at the moment that I'm interested in. And then going over on this side again, I've taken a centre point circle here and sort of drawn out a circle as if this little corner doesn't exist, round the corner and back round again. And I think this would be ideal for a kind of reversing turning space, as you mentioned, because at the moment the drive seems to be sort of designed that you kind of pull up and then where do you park? You don't want to leave your car presumably right in front of the doors, and you need space to turn. So I would even suggest here, I know this has already been done and is kind of complete and finished, but my suggestion here is to actually use the same material and enlarge this driveway area, but in this kind of shape. You know, put a circular shape in here from the centre point with the edging and with driveway material. And then over in this corner, again using geometry, I've got almost a perfect ellipse. If you imagine an elliptical shape coming in where this curves around here, the driveway, I've kind of eaten into that. And it's almost, if you imagine the geometry going off the page there, that sort of complete shape, if you like, just helps. It's taken us from sort of wavy lines, we're using complete geometry, and then I sort of managed to get that into a curved raised planter front edge, and it goes into the squares, and then I can get the square shapes, and then I can get some of these square shapes going through. I haven't explained that very well at all. I'm not very happy with how that's come out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if it sounds... It's hard to sort of explain what I have in my head and the reasoning behind this, but hopefully you can just see that it kind of helps link the curves with the straight lines. Let me show you another picture of something else that was kind of inspiring, that might help with my rather wobbly explanation here. Okay. This little garden shot here is the next thing that I want to sort of talk about. So here you can see how this is a very contemporary space. It's also just family garden, lots of lush planting and foliage planting, which I would like to do in yours. It's got the spheres, these kind of round topiary balls that you like, and I very much like, in this lawn space. And then it's a kind of garden of contrast. You've got these lovely perfect spheres and then this lovely clipped evergreen hedging of different heights. I'm not sure if this is the same material. We've got a buxus, which is the common box here, as a little hedge going out, and then we've got possibly a different hedge because it's higher, a hornbeam perhaps, or yeah, I think it is, coming out into the garden this way, and how these kind of squares work really well with the soft round shapes, and then how this designer has used the square of foliage and matched that in with a square inbuilt bench here, which is actually a concrete form with a wooden seat on the top. And all these sort of squares and strong geometric lines with this really soft, abundant kind of planting behind it, kind of spilling out and spilling over to the edges and this gravel. So it's kind of like a real sharp contrast, rounds and squares. And that was real kind of inspiration for me, and I want to sort of pinch that idea and use it. Highest form of flattery to have your ideas copied. But it's this idea of using these contrasts. So what I've done is broken up the area, these large, I mean, you've got big expanses of open space that we need to fill. So I want to use this idea of clipped hedges next to round spherical box balls. So I've got a clipped hedge going across here, and I've got another one down here, and it would have exuberant planting all around it, and I've got another one in this corner. These would be at sort of different heights, and then a L-shaped kind of bench in this corner at a different height. So it's a real garden of contrasts, this. It's sort of breaking up the space. I'd like to use the slate, or it doesn't have to be slate, but that kind of colour, that dark grey planks, those long thin strips, and I want to set them off just at an angle. I'm going to set this bench at the same angle as this back boundary here, and from there, this is completely perpendicular, if that's the right word, yes I think it is, and it comes off at 90 degrees, and then I'm using that angle to set, I haven't drawn this particularly well, but you'll see on the real plan that these little straight planks come off there, and it just breaks up the space. Now all the areas in between, all this lovely planting areas and these lovely structured areas, would be a combination of different kinds of gravel, and I don't think of loose pea shingle in this setting. I know you'd written on sort of areas of white cobbles as perhaps an option, and we can look at all different types, but this area here I'm thinking a kind of compacted gravel surface. It's not too loose and difficult to drive on and difficult to walk on, and then all the surrounding areas I'd go for like a breeding gravel, we call it, or a hoggin, which is a very, very fine, almost kind of dusty material, which is somewhere in between gravel and hard surface. It's a really, really, really good surface to use. You can plant immediately in it, you can walk on it, you can drive on it. It's brilliant stuff. So that's a lot to take in. Let me show you how I see that all coming together. Oh, before I do that, let me talk about some of these little features, just because I've got the photographs up. So for the bench area, there's lots of ways you can build a bench, but something with hardwood, quite sleek. You could have like a rendered surface underneath it, like this one, sort of L-shaped with a rendered surface underneath, and a lovely hardwood. This kind of idea really pleases me. This is something very new and different. It's actually using beautifully sanded sort of planks on their side, on their narrowest edge, and setting them that way, and you get these beautiful patterns and you get the depth of the wood here. Not sure about this surface or this surface, but that could also be on a rendered or a formed concrete plinth. But I really liked that. If we could find someone to do something like that for you, it would be fantastic. Well, this idea is rather nice as well. This kind of bench is beautiful. This is in a show garden that I went to, and here they do this. This is almost like an interior idea. They do this a lot now in kitchens, where they take the work surface along the top and drop it down the side panel as well, so that you haven't got a different top and base, but you run the same material right down to ground level. So it's almost like a wraparound bench, and I quite like that. I quite like how that's formed. Anyway, that is detail, real detail. So let me show you the model, because I think that's going to explain this a lot better than I can. This is why I did the model, because I have a tendency to waffle too much about concepts, because I can see it in my own mind, but I wonder if sometimes if clients can really see what I'm trying to explain. So here we are. I did a very quick, just spent a day kind of putting this together for you to really help you visualise. It helps me visualise as well, actually, when I'm laying out a new garden, and because it's such a tricky space, I really wanted to make sure all the proportions were right and that the geometry was right. So you might wonder what these planks are doing, but they're just such a quirky little feature. I've used them as the underside, as you can see there, of the undersurface of the bench here. which is just a little place to sit. You might not sit there, it might just be a feature, and it will have lights underneath and it will be lit up at night. And then these just sort of draw the eye out, and I just thought it'd be fun to sort of carry the material off through to the boundary, and it just sort of links the whole space, it ties it all together. You can see how the geometry is so important, this big turning circle or additional parking area here. If this was a sort of wavy line or a random line or even a square coming straight off this curve, it would not work at all. Believe me, I tried. So it's really important to have the perfect geometry with a centre point here off the drive and create this big curve. And then off the curve there, we can create this fabulous raised planter, which you were quite right, you'll come in through the gates and you will have this sort of feature. Now you'd suggested putting a water feature or gabions or something here, and the reason I haven't done that is you don't want to give everything away too soon. You've got to have some sort of surprises, and I sort of feel that as you drive in, if it's just bang, everything in front of you, it's kind of, you know, what do we do around the edge? If you drive in and sort of look to the left, or if you're turning, or if you're letting someone else out of the drive, or indeed if you are coming out of your house and leaving the property, I want to have a feature or something down on this, in this area. So it's just, you know, so that we make the most of the whole space. This is a large area down here, you know. And we can do a lot with it. We can make it much more interesting. So don't put everything in one place. Have a little bit of, you know, a little bit of hidden intrigue. And this is my suggestion for your water wall. I know you showed me a picture of the Primrose off the peg stainless steel waterfall, which is great. There's nothing wrong with it at all. I have seen it a million times now. It feels a little bit less bespoke and a little bit I don't know, maybe that's just me, maybe I've just seen them too much. I do love them, but I think we can do something better. And the suggestion I've got here is to build a wall in blockwork. It can be just blockwork rendered, and then you just have, I've done this too high actually, I should put this down lower. You have a water spout, a stainless steel, they call this a letterbox opening, and you can buy these from Primrose as well, and you have it fitted into the wall and the water circulates and drops the water, and we can do whatever we want then with this surface. We can have a mirrored stainless steel finish, or better than that, as it's a garden of contrasts, I would love to use this product here. So this is a product called Dry Stack Veneer. I've used it a couple of times now, and it's just a thin slither of different I think it's slates materials. You can get it in different colourways. This is a Harvest Mix, it's from Marshalls. This probably wouldn't work for your garden, but there's, well, maybe it will if you wanted to contrast, but there's also a colourway which is just all lighter and very creamy coloured, and there's one that's just all different greys. So what you can do is you literally clad a wall in this material. It gives you that lovely surface texture, and here obviously it's been used with vertical planting, which is beautiful, very high maintenance though, so not ideal. But what we can do is build one of these, put in the letterbox opening that I was talking about, and turn it into a water wall. So, you know, much better than the off-the-shelf one. Not that much more expensive, I don't think. In fact, it might even be the same, really, to have this built in blockwork and then clad, and then I think the letterbox opening is a few £100. So, you know, we can create something, and then of course you need somewhere for the water to fall. You just put a grid on like this, and it circulates and it comes back round the top, and it keeps going round. So that's that idea, and like I say, I've hidden that. Well, it's not hidden really, but I've placed it in a different location to you where you had it. Now all these areas that are kind of marked as, or yeah, here as this kind of bark material is planting areas. So I know that you've got plants that you want to retain here, so I've incorporated that and kept that. But also what I'd like to do is extend these areas of hedging, like that first photo I showed you, into planting, so you've got that contrast. Ignore the fact that this looks like ivy. It wouldn't be ivy, it's just an evergreen hedge. But what I would like to do is have this contrasted, this clipped box with soft grasses, very easy maintenance. I know it's all about low maintenance, you know, different grasses in there as like a sort of prairie feel, and then the raised bed planted behind it. So if you just sort of feast your eyes on that, and then we go back, it's very similar to that first photo. Yeah, hopefully you like this. I very much like this kind of effect. The hedging, the sort of hard landscaped rectangles, soft planting, box balls. So sort of recreating, sort of taking a bit of inspiration from that and doing that kind of effect. And you can see the trees. So don't be alarmed. I really want to try and sell these trees into you. It's hard. I wish I could drop in your background. You know, obviously we see the hills and the trees in the background, and I think if we sort of drop down, these trees are just going to link your garden into that environment. Perhaps if I take them out, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take them out and show you how flat the space looks without them. We just kind of take them for granted, trees, I think. Let's take them out. I'm doing a hard sell here, and maybe you're already sold into the idea. There's the garden without the trees. Maybe that's preferable to you. I don't know. I might have done the wrong thing there. But there's the garden without the trees. To me, it's just lacking that sort of bit of height and linking to the external view that I'm really after. So the tree I would go for would be something low maintenance. You don't want things dropping fruit or a huge amount of berries. And you want something to stay fairly small. We don't want any giants. We don't want huge oak trees interfering with your driveway, stuff like that. So this is my suggestion. It's called an Amelanchier lamarckii. It's a beautiful small tree. So I'm just going to get it up in all its glory at different times of the year. So here you see it in a show garden with clipped balls, and it's petite, it stays small, it's not a huge grower. Obviously this is a very young tree, but it doesn't get enormous. It's very well easily maintained into a small height. It's often multi-stemmed, so rather than just one straight trunk, as you can see in the autumn here, you can see the sort of multi-stemmed element of it. Common name is snowy, what's it called? Snowy marsupialis or something. Something like that. And it's just gorgeous. When it's green, it's beautiful. And then in the spring, you get these beautiful white flowers. This is the only one I haven't shown you yet. So here's it in the spring. You get this abundance of blooms, which just, I mean, it can give any cherry tree a run for its money, but you don't have the fruits. So it's absolutely ideal. Yeah, just beautiful. And then you get the lovely autumn colour. So have I sold it into you? I hope so. That's what I'd like to go for. Okay, so let's put those trees back in. Because I don't want to get rid of them. Unhide those. Boomf, there we go. They're our little Amelanchiers, and it would just frame this garden beautifully. And in this bed, I've just shown you kind of planting. This is very, very rough model, but you can see here the kind of what's the word? Contrast between the clipped hedge and the soft, tall, spiky grasses, and then the round spheres, and this would be your kind of lawn area there. So that planting bed there is just a little taster of how I would like to plant up all these areas, this area here around this hedging, dot some around here and in amongst what you already have, and the only bit of colour perhaps, oh, and all round here, all round this bit, perhaps the only bit of splash of colour and something different in this raised bed here. So there we have it. I hope that's something that you can sort of consider, have a look at, and feed back your thoughts and opinions if I'm sort of on brief or way off the mark, if I've sort of answered all of your questions, and you know, if you'd like to make any tweaks and changes to this, or if you'd like me to go back to the drawing board. I'm hoping it's not back to the drawing board, because I had several attempts at different shapes and things, and I really do feel that these shapes sort of fit the space nicely. So anyway, feel free to come back to me on video, or we can have a telephone call, or just on email if it's bullet points on an email, and let me know your thoughts. Okay guys, so I'm glad, well, I hope you had a good holiday. I'm glad I've managed to get this over to you today. Have the weekend to think about it, and yeah, perhaps I'll look forward to sort of hearing your initial thoughts next week, if possible, early next week. All right, thanks. Catch up with you soon. Bye for now.